home. Our next presenter is going to talk about understanding stress and serenity strategies. Amanda Clewis is our clinical director here in Compass Ministries, and she is going to talk about stress, and she's going to talk about how to mitigate the stress. And so, without further ado, I would like to present my good friend and our clinical director, Amanda Clewis.
Welcome, everyone, to the Compass Ministries online conference. We're so glad you joined us today. We at Compass Ministries wanted to put together a series of workshops that would bless the missions community and their families, but also the general public. And so today we're going to be talking about the topic of managing stress. But first, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Amanda Clewis, and I'm the clinical director at Compass Ministries. Compass Ministries is an open source nonprofit organization that provides support services for missionaries and their families, cross-cultural workers around the world. We started in 2011 under the leadership of Cindy Duff. She by herself wanted to provide counseling and support services to missionaries who were in the Tampa Bay area. So she started out doing that and providing welcome baskets to families who were coming to D&D missionary homes that were in her area, and slowly began to grow. And people began to learn about Cindy and what she was offering. She had a special heart for children and supporting them and their parents when they were on breaks from their missionary work, or whether they were coming back to the U.S. for good. There was a lot of transitional issues. And so people really sought out Cindy as a professional counselor and as a play therapist. And so Compass Ministries grew out of that ministry. Today, we are based more in the Tampa Bay area under the leadership of Ronnie LaQuesta, and we offer counseling, pastoral and clinical counseling, coaching, mental health coaching, debriefings, retreats, plus Compass Community Group, which is for young adult third culture kids, where they gather regularly for Bible study and fellowship. So we provide a variety of services, and if you're interested, check out our website at compass-ministries.net. So today we're going to be talking about managing stress, and I am not an expert on stress management. I am someone who is a work in progress, but I've enjoyed researching this topic because as a licensed counselor, a lot of people come to me asking, what can I do about stress management? I'm really stressed out. And those who are living cross-cultural lives, they interact with unique types of stressors. And so today we're going to talk about stress in general, and also I'll leave you with some serenity strategies to help you manage stress, because stress is a part of our lives, God-given, I would say, and it's something we need to live. And so we don't want to completely buck against it, but we want to learn how to manage it well. So I'm going to take a moment to share my screen with you. So bear with me and we'll get started. Okay. So the first question is, why are we so stressed out? I would venture a guess that to say that we are really enduring very high levels of stress nowadays compared to some time ago. There's a lot of quick moving aspects to our lives. Social media has added a lot of constant pressure, like being able to work from home has taken away a lot of the boundaries that we used to appreciate from work. And so there's just a lot of pressure that we are continuously facing from within ourselves, from within our homes, and then to the world externally. Let's take a look first at what is stressing us. And this is just kind of information of population as a whole. Recent studies found that 64% of the population in America was stressed about money. So if you're someone who's trying to really make ends meet, trying hard to pay the bills, then you're not unique. This is one of the major stressors that most people are affected by. 60% are stressed about work because that's a daily pressure that we feel. And so some of us who are working outside the home can quantify that pretty easily, that we have to get there on time, we have to perform well, we need to bring home the money. For those who are working with inside the home, it is also stress from being a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad, raising children, taking care of the house. That's also included in being stressed about work. 49% of the population is stressed about the economy. We went through a recent election and the economy was a major point of discussion and a major pressure for a lot of people. 47% stress about family responsibilities. And many families are not only concerned about their core family, but extended relatives and taking care of older parents and aging parents. So these are very big stressors that are consuming many of us. And then 46%, just below the family responsibilities, many of us are stressed about health issues. And that would be, generally declining health, health scares, or just losing vitality that we had previously enjoyed. So those are some of the major stressors. Now, if we were to have a live discussion together, you might be able to come up with many others. Health issues in the sense of the global pandemic that we recently lived through, or politics. Faith issues can be a major stressor for a lot of people. Finding community where you are. So these are some of the stressors that are specific, for general population. But then if we're speaking specifically about the missions community, we would boil it down to more specific stressors, such as learning to live cross-culturally, learning to function in a different language than your own, learning social norms and cultural aspects of how to do life and how to reach people and care for them and love them well. For those who are Christian workers living abroad, trying to find ways to share the gospel in meaningful ways. Just learning to live in another context, particularly without your natural social supports, is very, very challenging, very stressful for those who are engaging in it. And that's typically we view these things from an adult point of view. If you consider the point of view of the children who are moving cross-culturally, who may not feel like they have any sense of control over the move or what's happening, they might not have much of the information about where they're going and why. So from a child's point of view, these things can be extra stressful because they're not really sure what's going on. So these are some things to keep in mind. But I'd like to take another look about really what stress means. And I like this quote by Sonia Lupian. She's the director of Center for Human Studies on Human Stress. And she said, stress is not an illness and hence cannot be cured. Stress is a necessary reaction by the body, one that enables us to survive. Therefore, if you eliminate stress from your life, you end up dead. So our goal is not to eliminate all stress from our lives. Our goal is to be able to deal with it because it's helpful, actually. There's something called eustress and distress. Eustress is like the good stress, the things that motivate us, that keep us going forward in productivity, in reaching goals, in living. Now, distress is when those things fall into an unhelpful range, and we'll look at some of those ranges in a little bit. And that's where it starts to hinder us and we can't function as well. But I do believe that stress is a necessary reaction of our body and our mind that enables us to survive. So I don't know about you. When I see this picture, I automatically feel a physiological response. I feel a little bit afraid. I feel on edge and that that I might be in danger. But this is an example of how God has made us to be able to handle stress. So imagine if you lived many years ago in the jungle and you encountered an animal like this. You would have a strong reaction because you have to survive in this moment. And so thank the Lord, our body goes through a series of changes that enable us to fight or flight or feign. And so there are automatic reactions that happen when we are stressed that I really see as a gift. Now, we often live in that world of feeling stressed all the time where it's no longer helpful. But let's take a look at what happens in our bodies when we encounter an actual threat to our lives. I find this diagram really helpful. This outlines the fight or flight response. And so the first thing is a trigger. There's some threat, either real or perceived, that seems harmful for us and seems to threaten us. So I say real or perceived. This could be, when I say real, that's like the tiger in front of you. That is, the near miss when you're driving in a car accident, that where you almost get hurt. It could be conflict with a loved one. So that some kind of threat that causes you to feel a response. Now that's the real. Perceived threats are often able to cause a reaction in us. So when I say perceived, where we might be thinking, oh, my friend is going to be upset with me because this happened. And so I'm anticipating. And so I'm already feeling threatened. I'm already feeling stressed about that. Or you have a difficult conversation at work that may or may not happen. Or, you know, there might be a storm coming from, I live in Florida, so we have lots of hurricanes. We just endured some really, really tremendous ones that caused a lot of damage. But leading up to that event was very stressful, not just in the moment, but the lead up. So I was perceiving that there was a threat coming. So my responses were already getting activated. So what happens in the body when there is a real or perceived threat? Well, the brain gets activated, first of all. It's our central processing system, and it beginning in the amygdala and then to the hypothalamus, it tells the body, time to go. We have to activate. We need to make decisions quickly. We need to be fully engaged and get things ready. So the pituitary gland then secretes a series of hormones that tell the rest of our body, we got to go. We got to do something. We got to fight. We got to flight. We got to activate. And so cortisol and adrenaline are released, and those go throughout the body to cause a reaction. Well, here are the effects on the body, and there's many more than this. This is just a short list, but initially the heart rate increases. It's getting the blood pumping so that it can go to our body so that we can take action. Then the bladder relaxes because the organs that are not as necessary for fight or flight starts to relax. And digestion pauses, reproduction pauses, because those are not necessary in those moments, and your body wants to focus on what needs to be done. Tunnel vision, being able to focus specifically on what needs to be done. If I was eyeing that tiger face to face, I would need to be 100% focused on my escape route. So that's where this tunnel vision aspect comes in. Shaking because the body's getting ready to react. Dilated pupils, again, causing our vision to be activated. Flushed face, so blood is going to the skin, getting ready to activate. Dry mouth, slow digestion, and hearing loss because we're so focused. There are many more, but the body automatically is going into this zone where it's ready to react and help you survive. There's a lot of different ways that you can think about stressors, but here's one way to break it down. So you have different types of stressors, and that's indicated in the middle. But some of them, let's start with the physiological and psychological. Physiological stressors would be things that are affecting your physical body. So that would be the health concerns or injuries. I recently got through an injury and I was anticipating it was going to be really bad. Thankfully, the health report that I got from the MRI was that there wasn't anything major tears, but still, it was I felt the pain in my body, and then my mind was saying, okay, what are we going to do about this? So the physiological was actually then leading into my psychological welfare. So physiological is like body stressors on that. Psychological stressors, those are stressors on the mind that are affecting your emotions and your thoughts, and those can be coming from external or from internal. And so those are some of the stressors that we need to be aware of, things that are affecting our mental health. For us at Compass, we deal a lot with psychological stressors, and we try to sort out what we can control versus what we can't control. And that's true with any of these stressors. Some we have control over and some we don't. But it's good to be mindful of what you do have control over. So let's talk about, for a moment, absolute and relative stressors. Absolute stressors are ones that affect the population as a whole. For example, we just went through a presidential election. That's an absolute stressor that's affecting most people at the same time. The COVID pandemic, another absolute stressor. And where everybody's going through that stressor, people react differently, are affected differently, but it's affecting the population as a whole. Another one we just endured are these hurricanes. So my whole community was affected by this stressor. And, again, these absolute stressors affect each person individually, but there's also this commonality about how the population as a whole is affected versus individual folks. Now, relative is what it's specific to you. So that would be a stressor that affected me specifically. I had a conversation today that raised my blood pressure, that caused me stress. So that's more specific to me. And it can be relational, it can be physical, emotional, anything that is just pertaining to you. So these aren't separate from physiological, psychological, but they're different ways to kind of categorize stress. Another way to think about stressors are the difference between those that are acute and chronic. Acute is when something happens intensely for a short time. So that might be when you get the flu and you're really sick and you're feeling terrible, but it just lasts a few days. Or you have an argument with your spouse and that's not normal. So it's very short and intense, but you can work through it. Now that's opposed to chronic stressors, which are ongoing. They might not be quite as intense, but it might be ongoing, and that can also be a stressor. So, for example, a health issue that's acute versus chronic. An acute thing would be like an injury that you just got. Chronic would be lifelong allergies. Not quite as intense, but ongoing. And that is still a stressor. It weighs on you and it can zap your strength and it can be distracting and it can take your energy. And so these are a few ways to talk about stressors. Some of these might be individual to those who are cross-cultural workers. Like, for example, if you're living in another country and there's something that's affecting the locals, you may or may not be affected by it as much. For example, we were living in Central Asia and there were local elections and we didn't have much faith in what the turnout was going to be. Had been a series of corruption and we kind of thought, well, probably the next person is going to be more of the same, and we're not citizens here, so it doesn't affect us that much. So while the rest of the country was being affected in an absolute sense, we were being affected in a pretty different way. So that's one example where if you're in another culture, you might be experiencing this different. Another thing to keep in mind is if you're in another culture, things that are feeling very acute to you might be pretty normal stressors for folks in that place. When I lived in Kenya, there was food shortages, and that was kind of a chronic issue. There were frequent droughts. The local people were fairly prepared to deal with it. It was nothing new. For their whole lives, they were dealing with food shortages. For me, it was the first time ever I had experienced that. So it was very acute for me, very stressful. But for those who had endured it, it was more of a chronic stressor. So that's how people can experience different stressors in different ways. And again, within a family, something can seem kind of like a chronic situation for the parents of a family, but it might be the first time that a child is really experiencing this. And so therefore it can feel more acute. So we talked a little bit about this different stressors that cross-cultural workers experience. And there's something called the Holmes-Race scale. And it's a very helpful rating where they list different events that the average person might encounter in a year's time. And they're ranked by how stressful they are for the individual who's experiencing it. And so like the most stressful, like the death of a loved one or death of a spouse is like ranks very high, death of a child. So those would be very stressful. And then less stressful moves, changing jobs, learning new languages, political upheaval. There's many, many things on this list, down to the small ones, that the stress of holidays or visiting with in-laws, those types of things are still stressful. So stressful things are not necessarily just negative. They can be very positive things. The birth of a new baby, that's a wonderful, positive thing. However, it comes with stress. And so that doesn't make it negative, but it's just how it is. So you can see on this chart, on the left-hand side, there are stress levels. So a score of 100 on the Holmes-Race scale is about the US norm. Like in an average year, you're probably not encountering these major stressors. But according to recent research on these scales, If you're functioning at a score of 200, where then you're at risk for developing either a physiological problem or a mental health problem within the next year. Your rates of one of these problems happening are extremely high because you're living in a state of elevated stress. And so that's like the risk level, 200. But normal to functioning is at 100. Now take a look at this dotted line at the top at 600. The typical missionary functions regularly at a stress rate of 600. Let me say that again. The typical missionary functions regularly at a level of 600. So what does that tell us? Cross-cultural missionary life is very, very stressful. It is not normal. Again, let me reiterate some of those aspects. Functioning in a cross-cultural context, functioning in a different language where you might not be very competent in communicating. Many of the places where missionaries are going are very primitive or difficult or hard, remote jungles in the highlands of mountains, away from cities, away from support networks, away from education options for children, not having health options if you get sick or injured. Those are very stressful aspects of a typical missionary lifestyle. But many of the people who agree to do missions work in a cross-cultural setting, many of them are very strong and resilient and really prepared. They're committed to their faith, and so they're ready to endure the extra stress of that type of lifestyle. And they believe in God, and so they're leaning on the Lord's strength. And so that's part of why missionaries are like, okay, this is part of the package deal. I agreed to this. However, it's often very much more stressful than what people anticipate. That's one of the things that we at Compass, we do a pre-field training, not to teach people how to do language acquisition, but to prepare them for the stressors that they're probably going to face, the typical stressors that a lot of times people, before they move on the field, haven't really thought about. People didn't mention it. And so, like, for example, with our family, when we lived overseas, we lived with a host family who were amazing and lovely. However, it was still stressful to live with another family for 4 years, that we didn't have our own privacy. Just not having our own privacy and being constantly interrupted all day long was a big change for us. Not knowing if somebody was going to walk through our bedroom at any time of day or night, that could be a stressor. Not knowing if people were going to knock on the door late at night asking for something, that was a stressor. So even something as far as constant interaction can become a stressor and for us, that was one that we weren't anticipating. So let's take a look at this graph chart. So for those who are thinking about moving overseas, that's called stage 1. That's called pre-candidacy. So they're starting to investigate, starting to gather information, seeking out different agencies and places to go. So stress is pretty normal at that point. That's like the average American is at that point. But you'll notice as it goes into stage 2, already people who are seeking candidacy and orientation with agencies and locations, the stress is starting to skyrocket and it's already at risk, already above risk. So at the 2 point, it's already between 300 and 400. So already stress is elevated. By the time they're at their intermediate training, this might include language learning, cultural learning, those types of things. It's about 600. Then at the 4 stage, first field assignment, they're on the field, everything's new, trying to figure out, trying to get established. That's where the stress often peaks. And that is about 900. So high. But thankfully, the good news is it doesn't stay that high typically. Everybody's situation might be a little bit different. There's usually a dip as we get to stage 5, where it goes down to like the typical missionary level of stress, which is about the 600 range. And so things even off through career, stages 5 and 6, where you've learned how to live in another culture, you've learned your roles, you've learned how to do things. And so it steadies out, but it's still very, very high at 600. And then a retirement, often people return to their home country. and then it declines again, which is how it should be. As you age, you should try to minimize your stressors. But the big takeaway from this is that those who are choosing to do cross-cultural work are signing up for high level stress level situations. Now, even if you're not in a combat zone or a war zone or a famine area, cross-cultural living is still very stressful. So it's not usually not so helpful to compare. People who are living in European cities can endure this much stress because everything is new and different. So I would say if you are in that position where you're considering going to the mission field or already there, considering your own stress levels, don't compare with others. Everybody has their own situation. I would encourage you to focus on your situation and what you can do to manage it. All right, let's see if I can go to the next slide. Bear with me. Okay. So then how does our faith combine with this? I like to think of the words of Jesus that he says, I have come that they, my disciples, those who follow me may have life and have it to the fullest. And this is from John 10:10. I love this verse. This is one of my life verses. And I like this one because I don't think Jesus intended for us to live lives that are completely stressed out, maxed out, and barely functioning. He doesn't promise us prosperity, and I'm not saying that. He doesn't promise us easy lives and, that type of thing. But I think he wants us to choose life rather than living stressed out and to the fullest. We have options of how much we're going to trust the Lord as we're enduring all these stressors. And that's an important part of how we endure when we're living these stressful lives, whether you're on the mission field or whether you're in the US living in the same town you were born in. Doesn't matter. We all have stressors. And I think these words of Jesus really minister to us that he wants us to have life and have it to the fullest. I also love to look at the example of Christ. He never seemed like rushed or stressed. When I think about when he was on the boat with the disciples and the storm is raging and they're saying, Jesus, wake up. Don't you care that we're about to, go under? He wasn't stressed. He was asleep, first of all. So that tells us how relaxed he was. He also knew he had things in control. He knew he had power. He wasn't stressed. And so he woke up and he rebuked the storm and it calmed down. And so I take a lot of comfort in that when we turn to Jesus and we look to him for our comfort in the midst of crisis situations, that he gives us our peace and he gives us the sense of calm that we're seeking. So he doesn't necessarily remove the stressors, but he gives us strength through it. All right. Well, let's talk about how stress is nuts. Stress is nuts, but not these kinds of nuts. I'm going to give you an acronym to remember what and to be able to think through why is this situation so difficult for me? And this is really important, especially for those who are living a cross-cultural life. So these are things to keep in mind. So the N is if something's new or novel. The U is if it's unpredictable. T, threat to your ego. And S, a sense of low control. So let's dig into this and dissect each one. So remember, stress is nuts. So the N, if something is a new situation for you, you've never been through something like this, you have no former experience, you don't have anything to draw upon, everything is new. That makes a situation very stressful if it's new. So if you consider someone moving to the mission field, to a new country, new location, everything's new language, that's very stressful because of the newness. Now, some agencies encourage a family or a person to take a vision trip so that they can kind of check it out without making a commitment. And I think that's a really wise thing so that once you decide to move somewhere, not everything is new. You've seen it for yourself. You've experienced a little bit of it. You've had a taste of what you're going to encounter, and that lowers the stress when you are anticipating going back. I have a friend who's getting ready to move to North Africa, and for me, I've never been to North Africa, but for her, she's been there before. So it's not as stressful. She can picture where she's going to live and who she's going to be with. And she has a fair amount of peace about it. For me, I haven't been there. So that would all be new for me. It would all be stressful. So keep in mind, if you're experiencing a lot of stress with a situation, consider nuts. Consider if it's new. And if it's new, it's going to cause you more stress. Secondly, the U, unpredictability. If you weren't expecting the situation to happen, or if it was unpredictable, that can make an event or a situation very stressful. So, for example, if you lose a loved one, sometimes it is a bit easier if you have anticipated it. You've done some of the pre-grieving that comes with it. It doesn't make it easy, but it takes away that shock element. For me, I lost my mom, and it was an expected passing, but still so difficult. But yet, I imagine it would have been much worse if it had happened very suddenly. Here's also when you're living in cross-cultural context, sometimes there's political upheaval. When we were overseas, there was civil war, there was revolutions, and if we knew something was about to happen, then we could prepare our hearts, we could prepare our minds, we could prepare ourselves physically in case we had to leave or change our location. That being able to prepare a little bit helped lower our stress. But when things happen out of the blue, like for example, one of our situations, we had to leave the country because I was going to give birth. We left the country and a revolution happened and the airport closed right after we got out. We didn't know it until we landed in Moscow. We saw in the news that a revolution had happened right after we took off. That was unexpected. Thankfully, I didn't know it was going to happen. So we got out before it affected us, but it was still very unexpected and unpredictable. So that aspect raises the stress of a situation. So we have N, new or novel, U, if it's unpredictable, T is if it's a threat to your ego, a threat to you personally or a threat to who you are. What does that mean? It means if you are experiencing a person or a situation that threatens you or your thought of who you are. So physical or emotional. So if you take this in the context of people who are living overseas and you can't communicate very well in this other language, that's a threat to your ego. You can't function as an adult. You're kind of crawling like a baby, trying to barely get out the words that you want to say to buy an apple. It's like so challenging. That's a threat to your ego. Or if you've had jobs and positions in the US and then you go to another context and you're not qualified for much, that's a threat to your ego. That can be very stressful. Even learning to function to take care of a family. Maybe you knew very well how to take care of your children and to feed them and keep the house together in the US and you go to another location and then all of a sudden none of that applies. That can be very difficult to your ego. So if it feels like a threat to you, not just physically, but to who you are, that can really add to the stressfulness of a situation. And then the S of nuts is a sense of low control. You have the impression that you lack control over the situation. Now you'll notice it's not that you do have no control, but it's the sense. So even if you have some control, but you feel like everything is out of control, that can be very stressful. Sense of low control that you cannot manage the situation. Again, very common when you're moving overseas to feel like many things are out of your control. But even in regular daily life here, I noticed actually today, I was feeling a little bit stressed about a coming event because I didn't know how many people were coming. I didn't know who was bringing what. I felt like I didn't have any control. As soon as I got some responses and I was able to prepare my part of the event, I felt more control and my stress level went down. Different people have a different need for control. So that's important to understand. If you're a person who's type A, you need more control. This is going to be very uncomfortable for you. If you're relaxed and go with the flow type of person, then this may not be as important for you. So it's important to take into your account your personality type and how much control you like to have over a situation. Again, for those of you who are considering going overseas, many things are out of your control. So this is an important skill to get used to. And in those moments, to give your trust to the Lord. Lord, I do not have control over much of what's happening. I need you to take the wheel. So prepare yourselves for that aspect of multicultural life. But that is exactly where I invite you to bring Christ and his power and his peace over your stress. Because I love the verses in Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, with prayer and petition, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And I love that he addresses not only our minds, but our hearts as well, because we feel stress in our minds and our hearts. Sometimes it's just one or the other, but man, they're really connected. And the Lord addresses both of that, both aspects. We can't stop the stressors, but we can invite the Lord into it. So, he says, don't be anxious about anything. Don't be worried. Don't let the stress get to you. But in everything, here's two of his strategies: with prayer and petition and with thanksgiving. So giving our concerns to the Lord and being thankful for them. Giving them to the Lord, doing the act of prayer, talking to God, giving over the things that we're worried about, and then thanksgiving. It's so counterintuitive, but thanking him for the hard things, thanking him for the challenges, thanking him for those moments where you feel just not capable and you feel like a baby, like you can't even speak in the other language. We can thank him for those moments where we're humbled. And I think that type of attitude really helps us manage our stress. So as I want you to leave with some tips, some serenity strategies, remember prayer and thanksgiving are key ones. Okay, so here is a diagram that I really appreciate. It's like a stressometer. So learning to gauge your tension levels, and it can make it easier to find your peak performance zone. So you'll notice on this little diagram, hold on, I'm trying to move this out of the way. Nope. Okay, low stress, beneficial stress, and harmful stress. I think most of us probably have a pretty good idea of what harmful stress looks like. Our body and our mind are maxed out. We're not functioning very well. We're on edge. We're snappy. We're irritable. We're angry. All those things. That's the harmful stress level. Now, I don't know if many of us know the low stress level. Maybe you can think about a vacation you took where you were relaxing on the beach and nobody was bothering you and you're away from your work, away from your ministry responsibilities. That's a time when your body and your mind are disengaged, you're relaxed, no threats perceived. So maybe you had the impression that that's where we should function, but that's not real life either. We can't just live on an island and do nothing our whole lives. That's where there's the medium, the happy medium of beneficial stress. So it's not that our goal is to have no stress, but to have a beneficial amount where we have our optimal performance zone, where our mind is activating, we're problem solving, we're making a difference, we're doing ministry, we're engaging with people. That's hard, but it's also really good. So our bodies and our minds are engaged, but we're sharp and we have energy and we have optimism, excitement, and we're being productive. So that's actually where we want to aim. Too low stress is not very productive. Too high stress, not very productive. So we really want to function right there in the middle. This can be a helpful way if you have struggled with stress and you want to find a way to talk about it with your spouse or a friend. You could say, hey, I'm in the green zone, the yellow zone, the red zone. They could ask you for accountability. How you doing? What zone are you in? Oh, I've been in the red zone a lot. So maybe there's something you need to change, to shift, to not be in that zone too much. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, so how does stress affect us? Here are some of the ways. This is not a conclusive list. There's many more ways that we're affected, but I like this diagram because it shows body, mind, emotions, behavior. So in the body, we often feel stress in our bodies first, honestly. The body often is our gauge. We might notice we're tired, we're getting sick more often, we can't think straight. We're not making good decisions. Like we might feel tension in our, the decisions is elsewhere. We might feel tension in our shoulders. We might have backaches, headaches, muscle tightness, twitches. Some people I know, when they get stressed, their eye starts to twitch. That's a signal that there's been too much. Your skin irritations, breakouts, hives, that can be a sign of high stress. So, and there are many more. So it's important to take stock of your own body, how you react to stress, so that you can know, my body's telling me something. I need to pay attention. Now, the mind can also give us clues that we're feeling overloaded. We might not be able to think straight. We might not be making great decisions. Having nightmares, our subconscious is really activating and might be telling us through our dreams and our nightmares that like something's not right, and I'm really worried about this. You might notice irritation and negativity, that like your outlook has been impaired. And so that these are all signs that your mind is feeling overstressed. Now let's take a look at behavior. Accident prone. When I'm rushing around and feeling stressed, I will trip, I will drop things, break things. It's just that those are some of the things that happen. And I can tell, hey, I got to slow it down. I got to take it back a notch. I got to remove something from my plate. It's too much. But other people notice a change in their appetite, either less appetite or more appetite, a change in the sex drive. That can be another indication. Drinking more alcohol. A lot of people turn to alcohol or other intoxicants to make them feel better, to handle the pressure, the stress, but that's often not beneficial in the long run. Insomnia. Some people cannot sleep when they're stressed. Others can sleep too much. So any change in sleep can be an indicator that there's a problem. But feeling restless, that's another indicator. So fidgety and not able to relax would be an indicator. And then let's take a look at emotions. Loss of confidence. You're not feeling confident in who you are and your abilities and skills, more fussy and irritable, depression, anxiety. Those are clues that you might be feeling too much stress. And we have a great workshop about anxiety and depression in the Bible, put on by Cindy Duff. So if that's kind of getting your attention, be sure to tune in for that workshop. Apathy, where you just don't care. You don't have it in you anymore because you can't keep up that high level of caring. It's depleted you. And then additionally, alienation from relationships, apprehension about starting new things. All of these are indicators. There's many, many more. And you might want to make your own list of how you notice stress playing out in your life. That would be really helpful for you to see so that you can know, or even loved ones who are sharing life with you can say, hey, I'm observing this and this. Looks like you might be pretty stressed out. How can I help? That's why we need our support system. Sometimes it's great if you can be aware of it in yourself, but sometimes we need a community around us to help us observe when we're feeling stressed. All right, so what do most people do about their stress levels? The most common stress management techniques, most of us just veg out, tune out, watching TV or social media or YouTube 2 more hours a day, 40%. That's the easiest go-to. It's low-hanging fruit. Okay, we'll go through the list and then we'll comment. 38% surf the internet, 27% just nap or sleep, just want to check out. 23% eat, make themselves feel better. 14% drink alcohol, 12% smoke, 20% report they never engage in activity to help relieve or manage their stress. I don't know if that 20% aren't experiencing any stress or they just aren't aware or don't choose to do anything. That's an interesting statistic. But here's the thing. Sometimes the things we go to don't actually help relieve our stress. They just mask it. They just let us numb out. A lot of these are just numbing out. They're not dealing with it. And sometimes we actually feel worse when we've engaged these things. Like, for example, sometimes when we're looking at Instagram or checking out other people's profiles, it's as a stress reliever. But then after engaging in that, I might feel worse about myself. I'm not feeling relaxed and released. I'm feeling worse. So take a look at your go-to stress management techniques and I'd encourage you to evaluate, are they really bringing me serenity? Are they really helping me relax and get a break from our stress? Same thing with drinking alcohol and smoking. Like, it might make you feel worse. It might not be beneficial for you to alleviate your stress. So let's talk about what are the things that do help. Let's go to the next one. All right, so let's talk about some serenity strategies because I really want you to leave today with some tips. The first ones I like to call the big three. Eat well, exercise, get enough sleep. Eating, sleeping, and movement. I call those the big three. If you don't know where to start with how to manage your stress, start with the big three. That's a good place to start. Take a look at your eating. I'm not telling you to become some crazy health nut. Just look at what you're eating. If you're taking in too much sugar and carbs and caffeine, like maybe making some small changes can really help your stress levels go down. A lot of times we feel stress and then we take more caffeine to deal with the stress, and then that makes us feel worse and it makes us feel jittery, and then it's kind of an ongoing cycle. So might be time to make a fresh start. Just try to eat generally healthy, good food, good in, good out. That's a good place to start. Exercise. Again, not talking about extremes, not talking about going out and running marathons. Get some movement in your day. If you're starting from zero, then just take a walk. Just start with that, or do some stretches, do some, in your own living room, like doing stretches or, Pilates types strengthening exercises. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Just get started. And then thirdly, get enough sleep. Many of us are sleep deprived, and it's enabling our ability to deal with stress so much lower. So if you are not sure where to get started, get more sleep, eat decently, and get some movement in your day. Okay. That's a good starting point. But there's a lot of other things we can do to manage our stress. Spending time in nature. I love this one because it's free. We can all do it. We can all go outside and just look up at the sky. Sometimes when I'm feeling stressed, I will say, okay, I need to take a break from my computer or from the work in front of me, and I need to just go for a little walk. Now, some of us might live in an environment where we're in a high-rise apartment. It's very difficult to get out in nature. You might need to brainstorm a little bit. Where can you go? Where can you get out and see the sun? But it can be very calming. There's even things called nature therapy, where you go into a natural setting, whether it's woods or the beach or whatever you have within your reach, to just decompress. This is a great stress reliever, free. I love it because it also reminds me of my smallness before the Lord. So I see God in nature. I'm able to connect with the Lord better in nature. So if you have an option, if you've got a break in the middle of a stressful day and you have the choice, do I go on my phone and go to Instagram, or do I just leave my phone behind and go look at the leaves and the sun for a little bit? Try choosing going outside and see if it actually refreshes you more so than the other options. Not saying that's bad, but if you're looking for refreshment, you might find spending time in nature is really important. If you've gone through a season of high stress where it's been one thing after the other, and you can consider taking a break, a physical break from that location, then consider the nature aspect. It might not be the time to go on a full force tour of some city or, Disney World or whatever. You might do better to be in a calming, peaceful nature place. Now, that's not everybody's jam. Some people love the city and they feel rejuvenated by that. So find the thing that works for you to bring your heart rate down, to bring your mind at peace, and spend time in, whether that's, for many of us, we find that in nature. Spending time with God. So this can combine with nature, or it might be separate. Maybe you're a person who loves to like sit on the 20th floor of a high rise and see God through that. Spend time with the Lord. That is one of our greatest sources of strength and peace. And in Philippians, we are reminded God gives peace even in the midst of where there is an understanding. It's a peace that passes understanding, so that we can have peace even in these extreme stressful moments. I've had moments where recently it was happened upon a car crash. Had never experienced that before, so that was a new situation for me. But man, the peace of God helping us to know how to help the people who were involved in it was quite incredible. So finding God in the midst of your stressors is really important, but you have to have that relationship with God, be connected with Him when you're in those intense moments, and even in the lower moments where you're not as stressed, spending time with God. Spending time with loved ones. This is a key one. I'm assuming it's not a point of conflict for you to spend time with loved ones, and that's a source of joy. So that's something that can really bring serenity. Let's see. take charge of stressors. I wanted to include this one because some of our stressors are we've brought upon ourselves, and some we have no control. So sorting out the things you have some control over and the things we don't is a very important part of developing a serenity strategy for yourself. So for example, many people that I talk to are very stressed out. They've taken on a lot of ministry responsibilities and now they're maxed out and not doing well. So we take a look at the things that they have some control over. Let's see. Do you have to do A, B, C, D, and E ministry things, and then you feel guilty if you don't take on the sixth one? Well, what would happen if we didn't take that one on? And what would happen if we delegated these two? Would you be able to do those three that are more important to you really well and not be stressed? Then maybe that would be a wise decision. So taking things off our plate, we often feel the need to add more and more and more, or we don't feel the courage to say no to people. But sometimes saying no to something that's good in order to do the great thing that God has called you to is really important. Now, sometimes we just have to accept we cannot control the things that are stressing us out, particularly health problems or death of loved ones. Like things happen, we can't control those aspects, but there are things we can control. So try to minimize the stressors if you have control over those. The next one, helping others. It takes our focus off of ourselves and puts it on others. This can be really good change of perspective. It just opens our eyes, and then we often realize that, okay, maybe I don't need to be so stressed about things going on in my own life. Prayer and meditation. So giving our burdens to the Lord in prayer, meditating on scriptures, taking in the truths of the Lord is very important to, as a strategy, to have serenity, to have peace in our hearts. We have to give our burdens, give our stresses to the Lord, and then take in the truth of the word as one of our primary strategies. And then relaxation. I want to make sure that I've given you some relaxation techniques as part of this workshop. Relaxation is calming our hearts and our minds, our bodies, so that we're not in this highly elevated, stressful stance. And so we can do that with prayer. And one way to do that is a box prayer where you breathe in for about 3 seconds, you hold it for 3 seconds, you breathe out for 3 seconds, and you hold it for 3 seconds. So it's like a box. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. Sometimes I even combine that with the prayer and the meditation. Like I breathe out and I think about breathing out my worries. Hold. And I breathe in the peace of God. Hold. Breathe out my worries. Hold. Breathe in the peace of God and hold. That's one technique. Another technique is progressive muscle relaxation. And that's where you purposely tense up every part of your body, starting at your toes. You tense your toes, you hold it, and then you slowly relax it. And then you tense up your the next part of your legs, your ankles, tense, hold, and you work up your legs, your calves, your thighs, your hips, your lower back, your upper back, your arms. You tighten and then purposely relax each area. The trick is you can't be tense and relaxed at the same time. So you're activating that relaxation mode of your body, and that signals back to your brain, oh, we're not being threatened here. There's no tigers here. We can relax. So by purposely telling your body to engage relaxation, it activates the whole body to relax. So that's a great tool called progressive muscle relaxation. So here are some resources that you're welcome to check out. There's more out there, lots of studies on stress, but I want to leave you with one visual that I love, and that's this crater. We need to be intentional about surrounding ourselves at times with peaceful pictures, truth of the Word of God. And so I want to leave you, you have choices. You can be thinking about that tiger that's ready to attack you all the time, or you can choose to live with this type of visual and embracing the peace of God so that you can live life to the fullest, just as Jesus has intended. Now, we can't get rid of all the stress in our lives, but I do want to encourage you to learn how to manage it well. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for coming. If you have any questions, you can reach out to compassministries.net, and we would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Amanda. what Amanda was talking about, I love this nuts, right? New situation, unpredictability, threat to ego, and sense of low control. So, it is nutty. Stress is nutty. I have been dealing with a lot of stress myself. It's our daily thing here in Compass. High stress, just managing and juggling all our the ministry part and all those strategies that Amanda had given. Really, they're very helpful in connecting with the Lord. What I do is I journal. I journal a lot to the Lord, and even now, right before I came I came back in this live stream, I was journaling and just asking the Lord many questions, and so I want to encourage you. There is nothing more effective in stress relieving than connecting with the Lord. And He wants you to be authentic. He wants to be vulnerable with you and you to Him, and to trust Him. And that happens when you connect with Him. So I just want to thank Amanda for all those tools that she's given us. Again, if you want to talk to Amanda or further discuss this or even ask her questions, just email us and we will connect back with you.